Dark Money by Jane Mayer. When we talk about the problem of dark money in America, what we're really talking about is how ultra-rich billionaires are able to use their money in secret in ways that impact American thinking and therefore American voting to ultimately help their bottom line. When we talk about changing the way Americans think, what we're talking about in this context is investing money in 4 very specific areas. 1, think tanks. 2, academia. 3, grassroots advocacy organizations. And 4, electoral politics, but really what we're talking about, attack ads. Success in using dark money looks like controlling the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. Meaning the party that you want to be in control is able to win the majority in both houses, essentially controlling an entire branch of the United States government. It looks like controlling 30 state legislatures out of the 50. Also, 14 governorships or more. But I do want to point out one thing. In controlling Congress, controlling state legislatures, controlling governorships, one thing that I haven't said is controlling the White House. I think that's going to be a good point to kind of come back to at the end and hopefully provide us some hope as to, what we as individual Americans can kind of hope for in this pool of dark money that we're all kind of swimming in America today. I want to get ahead of something real quick here. The subtitle of this book is Dark Money: The Hidden History of the Billionaires Behind the Rise of the Radical Right. Whether you agree with the politics of the right or not, Jane Mayer, the author, she gives a lot of different examples of people on the Democratic left side that admit that as much as the left is trying to match the right in their use of dark money to influence American politics, the right's doing it a lot better than they are. So with that in mind, let's just jump into it. How do we get to the success we were talking about earlier? And I think a good starting point here is the story of David Koch running for vice president in 1980. So the Koch brothers, known for big oil, manufacturing, all these kinds of things, right? Charles Koch doesn't really like the limelight, so he gets his brother David, who's about 39 years old at this point in 1980, to run on the Libertarian ticket. To sum it up in a nutshell, it's a very anti-government kind of stance. It looks like abolishing Medicare and Medicaid, abolishing the SEC, the FDA, OSHA, getting rid of all forms of taxes, including capital gains taxes. She gives the example of getting rid of seatbelt laws. This was 1980. These were fringe ideas at that time. And how do we know they were fringe ideas? In November, the Libertarian ticket got 1% of the vote. What the Kochs learned from this experience was it's not enough to just win office. And in fact, they saw politicians as nothing more than actors just playing out a script. In order to really get American politics to go our way, we have to change the way that Americans think, and that way we will change the way that they vote so that we can get laws passed that favor our business interests. And in order to wage this ideological war in America, the Kochs and all of their rich network have decided what we need to do is fund ideas, not candidates. And the first place where you do that is by investing money in think tanks. What is a think tank? A think tank is a nonprofit organization that doesn't have to disclose its donors. And what they do is, in sort of like the most critical way that the author describes it, is they do your political work for a price. They crank out research papers. They publish books, they write op-ed pieces, they do litigation in courts, they get experts on TV when you see talking heads talking about this issue or that issue. So all in all, you see what these think tanks do is they generate a body of work that comprises policies and media strategies that get ideas that maybe no one was talking about before into the American public and into the American conversation. In this example, we have the Scaife Charitable Trust. The Scaife family, known for big oil, big aluminum, gives $23 million to the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation is the source of currently Project 2025. And if you look back, Project 2025 is actually part of a book series that has been in existence for many decades now. And the one example I want to give here to show the impact that these think tanks can actually have is that during the Reagan administration, the success of the Heritage Foundation was reflected in the fact that the Reagan administration passed 61% of the policies that were set forth in their mandate for leadership. Here's an example of a think tank generating ideas that ultimately become policies that get adopted by the president in office, who then passes the vast majority of the policies in that mandate. So this is the impact that think tanks can have on our society, when not only are we getting these ideas into the American populace and into American minds, if you can convince politicians to adopt them as a governor or even in the White House, you can see the wide-ranging impacts that these think tanks and the work that they do and the money spent to invested in them can have on American politics. If we're going to fund ideas and not candidates, one place to put your billions of dollars is into think tanks. The second is to put them in academia. As one writer is quoted as saying, in order to conquer politics, you have to get the intellectuals. You have to conquer the intellectuals, okay? So now what we're gonna see is billions of dollars spent on academic institutions, colleges, universities, and also law schools in order to change American thinking, not just from the ballot box, but from the educational systems that these voters are coming from. Now, in spending all of this dark money in academia, these billionaires on the right, they knew two things. One, you gotta go for the big ones. You need to invest your money in Harvard, in Yale, in MIT. You know, as the saying goes, so go these universities, so go the nation. And also, what the strategy has to be is, in these institutions, you need to find professors that are like-minded with you. Because once you have a relationship with them, you can then pour all of your money to get those university professors to advocate for you in order to establish what are these institutes or these programs within these universities, so that you, with your dark money, have a stronghold within them. You got to be careful though. You cannot go to these universities and say, okay, I want to start a program on conservative free market philosophy, or I want to start a seminar on incorrect philosophy of Marxism. As soon as you start showing that you have some kind of ideological bent, these universities are going to say, no, get the hell out of here. So what you have to do is you have to couch your program in something much more neutral sounding. So hard numbers, for example, $8.4 million given to Harvard to create an Institute for Strategic Studies, or $500,000 to Princeton to create a program in American ideals and institutions. Once you get in with these neutral sounding kind of programs, then you can teach whatever you want. So you invest all this money in these universities, what does that get you? Well, it gets you professors and it gets you books. What these billionaires really learned is you need to get a youth movement in order to get the ideas that you want from the fringe to the center. You get professors who are like-minded to teach the youth the way that you want them to think. Those youths then become the next generation of professors who get jobs at Yale, at Harvard, at Dartmouth, at Cornell, at University of Chicago. All of these big name universities now have cadres of professors that have been taught by the people funded by you, and now they're dispersing out to the rest of America and teaching the youth further beneath them in classes and lecture halls of hundreds of students at a time. And not only this, but going hand in hand with what the think tanks are able to do in terms of scholarship, your professors are able to generate books that promote your ideals, that promote your philosophies, so that then there's more scholarship for people to point to, further legitimizing the ideas that you want to be at the center of American politics. What we're trying to do is create a counterintelligentsia that is favorable, essentially, to your bottom line. Not just colleges and universities. Even more importantly, these billionaires learned we need to target law schools. If we're able not just to get the university professors, but we're able to get law professors as well, what we're doing is also training the next generation of legal practitioners who ultimately become the judges or even the Supreme Court justices that hear cases that might be cases that are yours in front of their own court. $68 million for law and economics, because just as we said earlier, you can't say, for instance, what we want to teach is conservative constitutional law. As soon as you say that, the law schools are going to say, get out of here. But when we call it law and economics, it sounds much more neutral, right? But as one of the major supporters of law and economics has said, and he even says in the book that he probably shouldn't admit this, although it sounds neutral, it has a thrust towards free markets as well as limited government. $68 million. $10 million goes to Harvard Law School. $7 million goes to Yale and to University of Chicago. $2 million spread amongst Columbia, Cornell, Georgetown, University of Virginia. So what does all of that investment get you? Well, the fellows in your programs, funded by your dark money, get Supreme Court clerkships. Also, as law and economics becomes more popular and more established and more legitimate, you start to get these infamous seminars, these 2-week seminars for judges and for lawyers, oftentimes in very fancy, extravagant places where you're training the future lawyers and judges of America in your way of thinking. And ultimately, in terms of hard numbers here, as the author points out, 40% of the federal judiciary having had some experience or training in the line of thought funded by your dark money, including Supreme Court justices such as Ruth Baders Ginsburg and Thomas Clarence. So you see, as you invest your dark money in law schools, you're really getting these ideas into the American legal system. And ultimately, if you have a case in front of a judge, they might have been trained in the very line of thinking that you funded back years prior. Just to give one example, in a study they surveyed between 2008 and 2012. About 185 federal judges had attended some of these seminars that were funded by business interests like Charles Koch, like Pfizer, like ExxonMobil, like Shell Oil. And in many cases, these private interests had cases in front of these judges that had taken some form of a seminar trained in this kind of thinking. Now, granted, of course, correlation isn't causation, but I'll leave it up to you to see how there might start to be some kind of, question marks around, training judges, treating them to these extravagant 2-week seminars, and then having cases in front of their courts. Here's what these billionaires also understood. It's not enough just to get the ideas out there. You need boots on the ground. Once you have an ecosystem where your ideas are out there for Americans to ponder and to grab onto, now what we need to do is we need to show that there's people on the streets that are actually taking these ideas as their own. Here's where we talk about funding quote-unquote grassroots advocacy organizations. I put grassroots in quotes here because the critique of this book is how these billionaires have used their dark money and fed them into nonprofit organizations with names like Citizens for a Sound Economy, or the Center to Protect Patients' Rights, or Americans for Prosperity. What the critique really says here is that these organizations, as much as they are designed to create an aura of grassrootsness, the truth is behind them are ultra-rich billionaires that are trying to get momentum for causes that essentially benefit their bottom line. The Koch brothers, they spend $7.9 million and put it into the organization Citizens for a Sound Economy. It looks like getting people to rally outside of the United States Capitol, getting agitators at town hall meetings, getting paid signature gatherers, Twitter organized protests, anti-Obama media events. When it came to big tobacco, one example was creating smokers' rights groups to create spaces where it seems that individuals are wanting to kind of advance these causes, but the truth is big tobacco is behind organizing them from the get-go. In the worst case, what we're talking about here is, in a derogatory sense, rent-a movements, astroturf rent-a movements, where it looks like they're average Americans rallying outside the Capitol and all this kind of stuff, but really it's all fueled by money provided by these big money interests looking to get laws passed that favor their bottom line. In investing all of this money in grassroots organizations, what does that get you? Well, in the example of the paid signature gatherers, you're able to get issues on the ballot. Because of course you're paying people to get signatures, but they're actually getting signatures of real Americans that are seeing all of these people in their community, not just people in a university, not just people in a think tank, but people actually out in the world. They see that they're starting to be surrounded by more and more people advocating these ideas, motivating them to sign petitions or what have you in order to get these interests advanced. And in one example here, by creating rallies and protests, they were able to kill the Clinton energy bill by, quote, striking fear in wavering Democrats. So you see, in investing dark money in these grassroots advocacy organizations, trying to make it look like not only are these ideas coming from the intellectuals, but also coming from average Americans on the ground, you create an ecosystem in which politicians who are voting on this bill or that bill, they start to fear, oh man, there really is momentum for these ideas. Maybe I should vote against it because it seems like I might lose my job based on all of this grassroots activity that I'm seeing around me. So when you're trying to wage this ideas of war in America, number one, fund ideas, not candidates, and two, get boots on the ground. The last area is we're going to go back to electoral politics. But when we talk about it in this context, we're specifically thinking about it in one way. I'm talking about attack ads. As this book demonstrates, attack ads work. So when we talk about attack ads, how is that money really spent? So let's get into some specifics here. The Center to Protect Patients' Rights. This is the example of the well-funded P.O. box, okay? But a post office box that has a budget of $61.8 million. What are you using that money for, post office box? What you do is you use that money for market testing. $10 million spent on market testing, media consultants, focus groups, and polls to figure out what are the best ways to tailor your attack ads to have the most punch. The example to give here is during Obama's time, they learned that Obama was very popular. And they learned, oh gosh, we're not going to win if we're attacking Obama in these ads. But if we attack, quote, toxic Pelosi and say that whatever Democrat is running in that state or local race is in cahoots with toxic Pelosi, not popular Obama, then we'll have much more impact when it comes to running these ads and getting the result that we want. From that $61.8 million, the Center to Protect Patients' Rights gives $4.8 million to another nonprofit called Americans for Job Security. And here's the example where we see the dark money going from your bank account to your foundation to one nonprofit to another nonprofit. And that nonprofit then uses a bunch of that money, $2.4 million, for one anti-Obama attack ad in 4 key swing states. And what is all of this money spent good for? Like, what does it actually get you? Well, one very striking example that the author gives is in the state of North Carolina, where the richest man of North Carolina, at least he was known as that once, Art Pope, in 22 races that he invested a bunch of his dark money into, the candidate that he wanted, which was the Republican candidate, won 18 out of those 22 races, giving the GOP control of both houses of the General Assembly in North Carolina for the first time since 1870. So you see, attack ads really do have an impact, and especially when you have a swing district or a swing state, if your ad is able to sway just enough voters to get your candidate to win, you can have national impact from that. Tying it all together here, as we learned in the beginning, running for office, not as effective a way to use your money to impact American politics. If you want to impact American politics, you have to change the way that Americans think, and that will change the way that Americans vote. You do that by funneling dark money through various nonprofit organizations that don't have to disclose their donors, to think tanks that push your ideas forward and create policies that politicians can take up as their own, into academia, colleges, universities, law schools, to get the next generations of professors, of lawyers, of Supreme Court justices to think the way that you want them to think. into quote-unquote grassroots advocacy organizations so that it starts to look like people out in the streets are taking up your ideas, not just the intellectuals, but average Americans. And you put it into political attack ads in a way that gets key swing districts or swing states to tip to give you a national favor. Doing all this was able to get the Koch brothers and their rich network the results that we talked about in the beginning. During the Obama presidency, they were able to get control of the House, control of the Senate, control of 30 state legislatures, control of 14 governorships, therefore impacting the agenda both on the national and local levels with the billions of dollars in dark money that they spent. But going back to the point I said we go back to in the beginning, one thing that the author's account demonstrates is as much as they spent all of this money and got control of all of these forms of government, Obama still won twice. Obama, the candidate that they spent all of this money to try to defeat, still won the presidency. What that tells us is that as much as these big money interests are trying to change the way that Americans think and therefore vote, an American's vote ultimately is only decided by themselves. You can't pay someone to vote a particular way in America. What dark money tries to do is to try to influence the way that we vote, but ultimately how we vote resides and rests on us. Dark Money by Jane Mayer. I think this book does a great job. I thought that this was an extremely fascinating account of what, quite frankly, was a brilliant strategy to try to get ideas that were once fringe to the center of American life, raising awareness about how all of this works, how there is so much money in America that is aimed to kind of influence us. And hopefully by at least understanding that it's out there, we can hopefully understand when we're trying to be influenced and make decisions for ourselves. I think we covered a lot. Thanks for your time, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye. Bye.